Hi, my name is Mark Engleman, and we're going to talk about the ERP strategy report we offer at my company. Now, picture the average owner or executive when asked about how can you improve ERP at your company. They reasonably don't have a crisp answer. It's full of ambiguity, risk, unbounded cost, and that's why the typical situation is just to kind of hold your hand until some collection of difficulties adds up to enough resolve to commission something as apparently costly and risky as a replacement project or a major upgrade. So we're going to talk about how to break down that complexity into bite-sized pieces of discrete information that can drive informed decisions with these complex systems. So we're going to start with an introduction to the major improvement paths for ERP. See, the first is to stabilize what you have. The second is to augment what you have. That's to add some major enhancements, maybe a new application. The third is to upgrade, to go ahead and bite the bullet and maybe go to the latest release or some other major online thing that's being offered, and with the costs and risks associated. And then the final is to replace, brand new ERP. So in studying these, we break down the analysis into studying each of those four, which there may only be 2 or 3 that are legitimate at a given company, but we study them against priorities that are in 3 groups: strategic, functional, and then finally technical, or IT. And the creation of those priorities is another story, another video, but they're down to maybe 10 in each category. The really big stuff that, if properly evaluated, will drive real good insight into the pros and cons of various improvement actions. So once those are established, we then test each of those priorities against each of the improvement paths against 5 criteria. And those 5 criteria you can see on the screen here. One is the achievability of reaching the particular priority with that improvement path. The second is the benefit if it's achieved. The third is the cost to achieve or to pursue this particular priority with this improvement path. And the next is the risk to do this for that discrete priority against that discrete improvement path. And the last is the impact on the company team. So every priority, the 30 that I've referenced, against every improvement path, it could be up to 4, tested against those 5 criteria. And I should also mention that all of these things that are being scored have a weighting function available so that the emphasis can be moved around on the relative influence of these various factors. Now, underlying this is a sophisticated ERP improvement cost model that we gather certain information from a client about their current cost structure, both direct costs and indirect costs to keep the current ERP going. And then we gather information about the possible augmentation, major other additions to the existing ERP, the cost to upgrade, and then the cost if it's a complete replacement. And in that light, I want to show you a concept called the ERP boundary. To have a good understanding of what functional areas are typically in a modern ERP for a certain size and type of company is very important when studying the cost of major improvements, mainly the replace action, where a company may have an existing ERP that does all kinds of things that really aren't in the scope of a modern ERP. And that needs to be reconciled as they study, if we do move, how are we going to be picking up these functions that are being supported with the current ERP that really are not an option with a modern ERP offering, at least not likely. Now let's roll up everything into the top level. As I said, all of what I've shown you rolls up into a score for each of the 4 improvement paths in my example. Picture this. If a particular improvement path got 100% score, that means that there was no cost, no risk, no impact to the team, and everything in the priority list was achieved perfectly by a particular improvement path. Of course, that's not real. That's never happened. So for each of the improvement paths for the ERP, Each of those scores is a function of just being reduced and reduced and reduced as each one of the priorities was tested against those 5 factors, and they all were scoring, something less than the perfect score, and it just kept coming down and down. So the number you see on the screen is not the number by itself is not the number we look at. It's the relative difference between the options. Now, in conclusion on this, you can see some of these options are basically neck to neck. In our example, the option to stabilize what the buyer has is slightly valued more than the replace option. Now, this is basically where the executive likely started. They said qualitatively in their gut, I don't know what to do, but we're doing pretty good, and the risk and the cost to go do something different is so daunting that it's arguably better to stay where we are. Well, the scores actually support that, but when you drill down into what creates that score, and decide to maybe change some of the weightings based on a different assessment of risk management or better techniques in cost control and a few other factors, all of a sudden these complex, ambiguous decisions can be driven by, first we acknowledge that it was not obvious by virtue of what we scored, and it can then be driven by a careful review of the details and things that matter more for a particular executive or executive team in this area. What you see here today is driven by a very comprehensive library of procedures, now at 1.3 million words, and then growing. And 80% or more of that is instructions for AI. And if AI does not have very detailed instructions and boundaries, rules to do something like you've seen here, it's not going to do it. It's going to make a mess. It'll try to do it. It won't be good. So as we built this out and tested and tested and tested, it was that pulled together this extremely detailed instruction set. And every step of the way is configurable and agile for a given company's or client situation. Thanks for your time today. And if you have a further interest to talk about this, please contact us and we can get you a copy of this sample report.